The Last Voyage of the Demeter is directed by Andre Overdahl and stars Corey Hawkins, David Dastmalchian, and Javier Botet as Dracula himself. The film follows a crew of men going on the Demeter to carry cargo from Carpathia to England. Unfortunately, this cargo happens to hold Dracula himself, who starts chewing on people left and right on board the ship, and they have to try and find a way to kill Dracula before the ship reaches England. Now, as you can see here, I have the Bela Lugosi Dracula film. I really enjoyed that version of Dracula, and there's been a few other versions of Dracula that I liked over the years, but lately there hasn't been much done with the character, apart from a very bad Luke Evans film that came out a few years ago. And I have been waiting for Universal to try and do this character justice once again. They're going to do it with their Dark Universe. That got cancelled once The Mummy failed. So I was like waiting for a Dracula movie, you know? I was waiting for something interesting to pop up, and got this movie that will be based on the Demeter storyline that's in the Dracula story. And honestly, I think this movie was alright. It was one of the better Universal monster adaptations I've seen as of late. The best one, in my opinion, is still The Invisible Man, but this movie was actually pretty enjoyable. It kept my attention throughout. The characters were mostly interesting, and I never felt like I needed to check my watch every time the movie seems to drag. It moved at a nice and fast pace. For the most part, the visual effects on Dracula look really good, and the suspense and tension was actually handled very well. I was surprised. There are like only 2 or 1 moment of jump scare that I could think of, but apart from that, this movie was able to keep its suspense and tension throughout consistently up until the final act, in which we see so much glorious Dracula action, and it was so much fun to watch. Beforehand, it was a tense thriller on a ship, a suspenseful type of horror film that relies on the secludedness of the ship and this small crew of men trying to fight against something that they cannot even fathom. And I think the horror aspect of the film in that regard was done very well, especially with the fact that we had a very likable lead actor here with Corey Hawkins, who plays someone who is more of a realist and is trying to find logical solutions to everything. And then we have the captain, who is a grizzled old man who has a son that he cares about. So it's not like he has no character. He's not like the Captain Ahab of this story. He is a very emotional character that has a lot at stake and people he cares about in this story. And you really do feel that pain throughout as the horror goes on, and it's taking a toll on him. David Dastmalchian also does a really good job as the first mate of this ship, who the captain is going to lend to after the voyage is done. And you can see how much he really cares for the ship and how much this entire voyage means to him. And David Dastmalchian does a really good job at portraying all the emotions this character goes through and the development he has throughout and how he interacts with a lot of the other characters. There's also a female character named Anna, played by Aisling France.
A few moments later.
Aisling France.
One eternity later.
Aisling France.
So much later that the old narrator got tired of waiting and they had to hire a new one.
I am so sorry, ma'am. I am terrible with your name. Please forgive me if you're watching this. She does a really good job playing this character who has a history with Dracula and is trying to do her best to help the crew members of the ship despite her not being the most welcome. Not just because she's a woman, but the fact that she is involved with Dracula in some way, and so some of the crew members are afraid of her, and that kind of conflict that she has with everyone and trying to do her best to help save everyone from this monster that she so fears is pretty engaging to watch. And her forming a friendship with Corey Hawkins' character, I found also the heart and soul of the film, as both these characters share some sort of longing and connection that they want in life. And so these two characters work very well together in my opinion. And the little boy in the film was also pretty sweet. And you know, for a child actor, he does a pretty good job. Now, how is Dracula himself, played by Javier Botet? Well, I think Javier did a fantastic job with this character. He's a really good motion capture performer for horror, with his very weird body and body language in his films, especially Slender Man. He is probably one of the better parts of that film. His performance as Dracula is very nerve-wracking, and I love how he's able to make Dracula feel more like an animal rather than a person. It's a different take on the character that I don't see much in Hollywood productions, and I think they did a really good job making this sort of creature of Dracula feel menacing. And they don't rely on jump scares throughout, they rely on tension and suspense. And the payoff to his kills are rather satisfying and bloody in so many ways that really does earn the R rating. I would say that my biggest problem though with the film is that there are tropes and character tropes and character types that we've seen before, and some stupid decisions made in the second act of the film that made it hard for me to care for some of the characters because of the decisions they make throughout the movie. I think this movie could have trimmed some of that down, maybe tightened the runtime a little bit to have those moments not really happen all that much, and it will make the pacing a little bit better and have the film make a little bit more sense and not feel as contrived at times, because there's definitely a lot of moments where I do expect something to happen. And while I do really love the production design, especially in the first act and on the ship, there are definite moments where you can tell that something is green screen or CGI. It's still done very well, and it doesn't take you completely out, but when you are someone who's longing for more practicality in movies nowadays, I don't think this movie's gonna do it for you. Especially for horror fans, I find the most creepy films to be the most practical. Case in point, Talk to Me earlier this month was a really good horror film that mostly uses practical effects and makeup effects. This uses a lot of CGI, especially for Dracula, and in some points it does look good. But the movie also uses nighttime a lot, obviously because it's Dracula, but also to hide some of the CGI imperfections there. Still looks good, but in many ways it kind of feels cheap, and it feels like the movie could have done so much more with this story, because I think the story had the potential to actually be a great Dracula film. Right now, it's just a good one, and for me, it reeks a lot of missed potential here. Overall, still, the acting is really good. The production design and costumes are really fantastic. The acting, as I said, is great, and the characters are good, and Dracula himself is well portrayed. The horror and suspense and tension is consistent throughout mostly. It's just that there's some jump scares, some character tropes I've seen before, and predictability in the plot and screenplay that kept it from being the great Dracula movie I wanted it to be. But it is still a fun time in the theaters. I do recommend you guys go check it out. And I'm going to give The Last Voyage of the Demeter a B. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please leave a like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you guys next time.